The Galactic Empire was at its zenith when whispers of unease spread across its outer systems. Entire fleets flew under banners of silver and crimson, and its armies marched across worlds with an air of inevitability. In those days, the name most often spoken with reverence and dread was that of General Selene Vera, a woman who carved victory from chaos with a mind sharper than any blade. Soldiers who fought beneath her command swore she could see battles unfold long before the first shot was fired. Enemies cursed her brilliance, calling her the Wolf of the Stars, a predator who hunted warlords and rebels with unrelenting precision. Yet even wolves are vulnerable when the pack turns against them. The Empire tolerated greatness only so long as it remained subordinate. Selene had won too many wars, inspired too many odes of loyalty that bent toward her rather than the Emperor. It was not ambition that doomed her but fear from her peers, from the trembling counselors who saw shadows of rebellion in every act of triumph. When the Emperor's court devised a campaign against the border worlds, she was appointed to lead. It was a poisoned gift, wrapped in pomp and ceremony, the kind of honor that conceals a dagger. The battle came at the edge of the Andrew Rift, a swirling nebula of violet gas that distorted senses and scattered signals. Selene's fleet, sleek and disciplined, moved like a single living organism. Her warships danced between boasts of plasma fire, outmaneuvering squadrons 3 times their number. She anticipated enemy thrusts, feigned retreats, and turned traps into victories. For a moment, it seemed the impossible was within her grasp, another legend to be etched into her name. Then the tide shifted, not because of superior firepower, but because betrayal blossomed within her ranks. 2 of her admirals, men she had once rescued from ruin, turned their cannons on her flagship. The coordinated barrage ripped through her defenses, tearing holes where unity should have stood. Confusion spread across the fleet. Loyal captains demanded orders, but hesitation bloomed in those who feared the council more than they honored their general. Selene fought to steady them, barking commands with the same steel that had carried them through countless wars. Yet she knew the truth. The battle was already lost. Her flagship endured long past reason, shields flickering like dying stars. She refused to abandon her post, guiding her fleet with calm precision even as betrayal consumed them. When the final breach came, fire swallowing corridors and bulkheads collapsing around her, she still stood at the heart of the command deck, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The last words she gave her crew were not cries of despair, but an order to live, to carry memory forward. "They may take me," she said, voice steady even as smoke choked the air, "but our story is not extinguished." The Empire paraded her capture as if it were a coronation. Across a dozen systems, broadcasts showed her bound in iron restraints, her face unbowed, her eyes like frozen fire. The court declared her a traitor, accusing her of conspiring against the throne. Soldiers who had followed her for decades were slaughtered or sold into servitude, their loyalty branded as rebellion. The trial was a performance, a script written to erase her honor. Yet every accusation hurled against her seemed to strengthen the silence with which she bore it. She would not beg. She would not kneel. On the day of her execution, the plaza overflowed with citizens commanded to bear witness. Statues of the Emperor loomed over the stage where Selene was displayed, battered but unbroken. The air vibrated with the Empire's manufactured triumph, but among the gathered crowds there was a different current. Quiet grief, hushed reverence, eyes that turned away not out of indifference but shame. Selene spoke only once, her voice carrying across the silence. "Empire's rot," she declared, "but blood remembers." The words hung like a blade suspended above the crowd, a warning disguised as prophecy. The council thought her death would extinguish her memory, but it did the opposite. Tales of her defiance spread faster than edicts could suppress them. Her name became a whispered oath among broken soldiers and a quiet prayer in the mouths of the enslaved. The Empire celebrated its triumph with firework displays and grand processions, yet unease stalked their corridors. They had slain the general, but shadows lingered. Far from the center of power, hidden among the forgotten fringes of space, her legacy endured in the most dangerous form possible. Selene had children. 3 lives she had concealed from the Empire's gaze, safeguarded beyond the reach of betrayal. Few knew their existence, fewer still their whereabouts. Yet the council had not forgotten her final words, and though they dismissed them as defiance, a chill followed those who heard them. Empire's rot, but blood remembers. The plaza stones were washed clean of her blood, her banners burned, her memory officially stricken from archives. Yet absence has its own gravity, and her death left a wound that no propaganda could seal. The council did not know that their triumph was only prologue, that in silencing the general they had awakened something far more dangerous. For in the quiet places of the galaxy, where no imperial fleet patrolled, 3 children were growing, and their mother's last words were carved into their hearts like fire. The planet where Selene's children were hidden had no place on imperial charts. It was a world of pale skies and jagged stone, unremarkable enough to escape conquest yet harsh enough to shape endurance. Among the barren valleys and the faint shimmer of old mining ruins, 3 siblings grew in secrecy, their lives guided by the loyalty of those few soldiers who had survived their mother's final battle. The Guardians never spoke her name aloud, fearing ears that might betray them, but the children felt her presence in every tale whispered by firelight and in every drill that demanded more than comfort aloud. The eldest was Kalen, a boy who carried silence like armor. Where others saw games or play, he saw patterns, lines of strategy drawn in the dust with sticks, battles rehearsed with stones on a cracked floor. He asked questions his tutors could barely answer. How long a fleet could endure without resupply? How many soldiers could march before hunger devoured discipline? How loyalty could be bent or broken? Even as a child, his gaze seemed older than his years, and when others faltered, his voice steadied them. He was the shadow of his mother's mind, though sharpened by his own relentless will. Lyra, the second-born, did not wield silence but fire. She wrestled with wooden swords until her hands blistered, sparred against grown soldiers and laughed when they hesitated to strike her. Her spirit was loud, reckless, and unyielding, and when she was cut or bruised, she wore the scars as though they were medals. Unlike Kalen, she spoke often of vengeance, unafraid to hurl her hatred at the night sky, as though the Empire might hear. Those who trained her often despaired of her temper, yet in battle exercises, none could deny her raw brilliance. Where Kalen planned for the long war, Lyra embodied its fury. The youngest, Darren, was unlike either sibling. Gentle in voice and manner, he studied old texts preserved in hidden archives, learning not only the history of conquest but the fragile art of peace. While Kalen spoke of angles and ambushes, and Lyra shouted for blood, Darren asked what kind of world might rise after vengeance. He understood people in ways his siblings did not, the fears that chained them, the dreams that moved them. Even as a child, his word could calm disputes among the hidden exiles. To the elders, he was a reminder that war might not devour everything. Yet his loyalty to his mother's memory was no less fierce, his quiet resolve perhaps more dangerous than his siblings' fire. Their lives were marked by secrecy, but secrecy cannot silence destiny. As they grew, fragments of truth reached them, hushed conversations, half-remembered songs, the sudden grief on a guardian's face when they asked too many questions. By the time Kalen reached his 17th year, the veil could no longer hold. One night, the siblings gathered in a crumbling bunker once used to store mining equipment. A chest was brought before them, sealed with the insignia of their mother. Inside lay fragments of armor scorched in battle, a blood-stained banner, and a recording that flickered to life with her final words. She did not weep in the message, nor did she plead. Instead, she looked at them with the same unbroken steel she had shown at her trial. "If you see this," Selene's voice said, "then I am gone. They will call me traitor, but you must remember, I fought for those who could not fight. Do not carry my shadow if it blinds you. Carry it if it gives you strength. Empires rot, but blood remembers." The silence after the message was heavier than stone. Kalen's jaw tightened. His mind raced not with grief but with calculation, already shaping the war he knew must come. Lyra's eyes burned, her fists trembling as if she could strike the Emperor himself across the stars. Darren's tears fell quietly, but behind them lay a spark of purpose, fragile yet unyielding. In that moment, the 3 of them understood that their childhood was over. The Guardians tried to dissuade them. They spoke of survival, of the futility of striking against an empire that spanned 1,000 systems. They begged the siblings to wait, to hide, to grow stronger. But Selene's children could no longer live in shadows. Around a fire beneath the cold sky, they swore an oath. Kalen vowed to dismantle the empire with patience, turning its strengths into weaknesses until the throne itself cracked. Lyra swore to burn its armies with a blade, to repay every drop of blood with rivers. Darren swore to speak for those too afraid to raise their voices, to unite the oppressed under a banner of hope rather than fear. Together, they promised their mother's name would not be forgotten, and her murder would not go unanswered. That oath bound them, but it also divided them, for each envisioned the path differently. Kaelin pressed for preparation, for years of quiet building before striking. Lyra raged at the thought of delay, her hunger for action like a storm. Darren urged balance, insisting that revenge without vision would only replace one tyranny with another. Their arguments often flared into bitterness, but even in their fiercest quarrels, the bond of blood held. They were three facets of a single blade, each incomplete without the others. As weeks turned to months, rumors reached even their distant refuge. The Empire celebrated its conquests, but beneath the triumph, unrest smoldered. Systems groaned under heavy taxes, governors grew corrupt, and soldiers deserted from garrisons stretched too thin. Kaelin studied these cracks like a mason searching for weakness in stone. He began charting trade routes, fleet deployments, and the names of officials despised by their people. Lyra trained harder, driving herself to exhaustion until her strikes became blows of precision. Darren spoke to the exiles, not as children of a martyr but as future leaders. Slowly, the hidden community began to see in them not just orphans of a fallen general, but sparks of something greater. The night came when they stood together beneath the ruins of the old mining tower, looking out over the valley that had kept them safe but small. The stars glimmered like endless battlefields, silent yet waiting. Kaelin broke the quiet first, his voice deliberate. "We are ready." Lyra's grin was sharp as steel, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. Darren did not smile, but he nodded, his gaze steady with conviction. They knew the path ahead would demand sacrifice, perhaps even their lives. But in their hearts burned the words of the mother they had lost, "Empires rot, but blood remembers." And so the children of Selene Vera took their first steps toward vengeance, unaware that with each step they were reshaping not only their own fate, but the fate of the galaxy itself. The first strike was not a grand assault, but a whisper of defiance. A supply convoy vanished in the border regions, its escorts lured into an asteroid field where hidden charges tore them apart. Survivors spoke of coordinated precision, of voices on intercepted channels that carried the same edge once heard under General Selene's command. The Empire dismissed it as piracy, but Kaelin knew the message had been delivered. The children of the fallen general had begun their war. Kaelin directed from the shadows, his mind weaving threads of strategy that turned meager resources into weapons of disproportionate effect. He mapped Imperial patrols, charted their weaknesses, and anticipated their responses as though playing a game of endless moves. To his allies, his calm was unshakable. Every raid seemed to confirm his vision of a war that could be won not with strength, but with precision. Yet beneath the calm lay an unspoken burden. Every success raised expectations. Every life risked weighed heavily on his conscience. Lyra thrived in the chaos Kaelin shaped. She led the boarding parties with fire in her eyes, her presence igniting courage in those who fought beside her. Where she struck, hesitation died. She wielded her blade as though it were the continuation of her rage, carving a reputation as merciless as it was inspiring. Whispers began to follow her, that she fought like her mother, that the wolf of the stars lived again in her. The Empire called her a terrorist, but among the broken worlds, she became a living symbol of vengeance. Darren moved where neither strategy nor fury could reach. He walked among the enslaved miners, the starving farmers, the deserters who had abandoned the imperial standard. His words were not of destruction, but of freedom, of a galaxy that could exist beyond the shadow of the throne. People listened to him because he understood their despair, because his quiet resolve spoke louder than any threat. Where Kaelin's plans provided victories and Lyra's fire demanded loyalty, Darren's vision transformed fear into purpose. He was the voice that turned scattered rebels into a cause. Together, they forged something larger than themselves. The first coalition was small, outcasts, deserters, and the remnants of fleets crushed under imperial banners. Yet under Selene's children, these fragments became sharp blades. Their raids grew bolder, their strikes more precise. Stations once thought impregnable fell to sabotage. Governors known for cruelty were assassinated in their halls. With every victory, the Empire's mask of invincibility cracked. The Council could not ignore them. What began as piracy now threatened trade across 3 sectors. An imperial warlord, Admiral Rang, was dispatched with a fleet to eradicate the upstarts. Rang was no ordinary commander. He had been among those who betrayed Selene at the Andral Rift. For him, crushing her children would not only restore order, but silence the ghost of the woman he had feared and envied. Kalen anticipated Rang's arrival and prepared the battlefield long before the fleet appeared. He chose a narrow star corridor where gravitational anomalies pulled at unwary ships, a place where numbers became a liability rather than strength. His forces were small, but every mine, every ambush point, every false signal had been laid with meticulous care. When Rang's armada entered the corridor, they walked into a storm of deception. The battle was chaos sculpted into design. Lyra led the strike teams that tore into isolated cruisers, her laughter carrying over comms as she cut down Rang's men. Kalen, at the command nexus, moved pieces with surgical precision, sacrificing nothing without purpose. Darren rallied the frightened, urging those who faltered to remember not vengeance alone but the freedom that waited beyond Fae. For hours, the corridor blazed with fire until Rang's once proud fleet fractured, discipline collapsing under the weight of dread. In the climax, Lyra personally boarded Rang's flagship. The duel was brutal, a clash of steel and hatred. Rang sneered of her mother's fall, boasting that he had watched Selene bleed. His words only sharpened her fury. When her blade pierced his chest, she whispered that his name would be forgotten while her mother's lived forever. The crew surrendered, and the flagship burned in orbit, a monument to betrayal repaid. The victory echoed across the galaxy. Systems once cowed by Imperial might now dared to resist. The siblings stood together on the bridge of a captured warship, the banner of Selene raised once more. Kalen saw the war stretching far ahead, battles yet to be fought, sacrifices yet demanded. Lyra reveled in the triumph, eager for the next conquest. Darren gazed at the stars, knowing each victory bound them tighter to a destiny that might consume them. Yet beneath their triumph lay tension. Kalen urged caution, warning that striking too boldly would bring the Empire's full weight crashing upon them. Lyra argued for relentless attack, convinced that Fae was the only language the throne understood. Darren urged them to think of the galaxy they wished to build, not just the Empire they sought to destroy. Their unity held, but cracks were beginning to show, the pressure of purpose grinding against their differences. Still, the movement could not be stopped. In every whispering tavern and every hidden bunker, people repeated the story. The children of the fallen general had risen, and they were dismantling the empire piece by piece. The throne trembled, and though the emperor's face never faltered in broadcasts, the council knew a reckoning was approaching. In the quiet after the battle, the siblings gathered in the war chamber of their flagship. The stars stretched before them, endless and waiting. Kalen traced the map with his eyes, already calculating their next step. Lyra leaned on her sword, restless for more blood. Darren stood apart, his voice calm but weighted. "This is only the beginning," he said. "We fight for her, yes, but if we forget why she fought, we will become the very thing we seek to destroy." The words lingered, unchallenged but not wholly embraced. Beyond the viewport, the galaxy turned slowly, indifferent yet ready. Their mother's shadow guided them still, but now the shape of the war, and of themselves, was no longer hers alone. The march toward the Empire's heart was no longer whispered rebellion, but a thunder that shook the stars. Word of Admiral Rang's death spread faster than fleets could move, igniting insurrections in garrisons and riots in cities long shackled by Imperial rule. Entire systems raised Selene's banner, pledging themselves not to an emperor but to her children, whose defiance had become legend. The siblings stood at the helm of a coalition no longer fragile, their mother's prophecy alive in every oath sworn beneath their cause. Yet with every victory, the shadow of the throne loomed larger, demanding a final reckoning. Kalen knew the Empire would not crumble quietly. He studied the defenses of the capital system, a fortress surrounded by concentric fleets and worlds fortified to the point of obsession. For weeks he pored over intercepted transmissions, anticipating counterstrikes, predicting the Emperor's desperation. His mind was a storm of possibilities, each scenario weighed against the cost of lives. In the silence of his chamber, he whispered to himself the words his mother had once spoken, "Empires rot, but blood remembers." He would not fail her, but he feared the price of remembrance might consume them all. Lyra grew restless with planning. She walked the decks of their flagship like a caged predator, sparring with soldiers, sharpening her blade until sparks showered the floor. "The time for waiting is over," she told Kalen one night, fire flashing in her eyes. "We strike at the heart, or the galaxy will think us cowards." Her voice carried the weight of every scar, every memory of chains and screams. She could not imagine a future built on hesitation. To her, justice required the Emperor's blood, nothing less. Darren saw both truths and the peril between them. In council halls filled with representatives from newly freed worlds, he spoke not of vengeance, but of renewal. He reminded them that a throne destroyed without vision left only a vacuum, and vacuums bred monsters. His words soothed doubts, held the fragile alliance together, and gave purpose beyond fire. Yet he too understood that speeches could not defeat an emperor who had ruled through terror for decades. War was inevitable, but what came after was his burden to shape. When the fleets finally gathered, the void shimmered with thousands of ships, scavenged freighters reforged into war machines, cruisers captured from imperial docks, ragtag vessels united by a single purpose. They were not as vast or polished as the imperial armadas, but they were bound by something sharper than discipline: belief. The siblings stood before them, their voices carried through every channel. Kalen promised victory through precision, Lyra demanded vengeance for every drop of spilled blood, and Darren offered freedom, a future where children would not inherit war as their legacy. Their words wove together, a trinity of fire, steel, and hope. The battle for the capital began at the edges of the system, where imperial fleets surged forward in perfect formation. Kalen directed his forces like a master musician, striking where their coordination left them vulnerable, scattering wings before regrouping them into deadly traps. Each move anticipated the Empire's counter, each sacrifice calculated for maximum effect. The void flared with detonations, but slowly, impossibly, the tide shifted. Lyra plunged into the thick of it, her warship at the tip of every assault. She led boarding actions with reckless ferocity, cutting through armored halls, her laughter echoing like thunder. To those who followed, she was invincible, a storm that no imperial wall could withstand. Her blade struck down generals who had once sneered at Selene, her vengeance swift and unrelenting. She bled, but she did not falter, carrying her mother's memory into every strike. Within the capital itself, Darren's words bore fruit. Civilians rose in defiance, slaves turned on their masters, and even soldiers long crushed under imperial boots laid down arms rather than fire on their own people. Broadcasts spread through the city, not of propaganda but of truth. The siblings fighting among the stars, their mother's banner raised high. For the first time in generations, the people of the Empire believed they could be free. At the climax, the siblings' flagship pierced the defensive rings and descended upon the capital world. The Emperor's palace loomed like a black spire above the city, its walls said to be unbreakable. Yet walls crumble when those within lose faith. The gates fell to fire and fury, and the siblings stormed the throne room together. The Emperor awaited them, draped in gold and arrogance, his crown a mockery of authority. Age had not softened him. His voice dripped with scorn as he recalled Selene's execution. "Your mother knelt before me," he sneered, "and so shall you." But the siblings did not kneel. Kalen struck first with words sharper than blades, unraveling the Emperor's boasts with cold truths of his empire's decay. Lyra followed with steel, clashing against guards and carving a path through the hall. Darren's voice rang above the chaos, not for the Emperor but for the galaxy watching through hidden broadcasts. "This is the end of tyranny, not the birth of another." The confrontation ended as it was always meant to, with blood. Lyra's blade found the Emperor's heart, her vengeance complete. His crown fell and shattered on the floor, fragments scattering like broken illusions. The throne was empty at last. Silence filled the chamber as the three siblings stood together, their breaths heavy, their faces marked with sweat and firelight. Kalen saw the path forward, a war not yet finished but winnable. Lyra felt the weight of vengeance, the hollow ache that comes when the fire finally burns out. Darren saw the fragile dawn of something greater, a chance to shape a galaxy from ruins. When they emerged from a palace, the people did not chant the name of an emperor. They chanted the name of Selene, the woman who had defied the throne, and her children who had avenged her. The empire was no more, its foundations shattered by the blood it had spilled. Yet in the siblings' hearts, there was no triumph untempered by burden. They had won, but the story was not finished. The galaxy was free, but freedom was fragile, and the question of what came next would test the modern war ever had. Far above the city, Selene's banner unfurled in the wind. The siblings stood beneath it, united yet changed, gazing toward the horizon where stars awaited. Empires rot, but blood remembers, and now the galaxy would remember her not in chains, but in freedom. The palace stones still carried the scent of fire when the first cracks of discord began to form. Victory had been decisive, but peace was not a crown that could simply be placed on the siblings' heads. With the Emperor slain and the capital under their control, systems across the galaxy declared allegiance to Selene's heirs, yet those declarations came with demands. Worlds once stripped by imperial greed clamored for reparations, soldiers begged for stability, and governors who had defected in the 11th hour sought reward for their convenient loyalty. The empire had been shattered in a storm of blood, but from its ruins rose 1,000 competing voices, each desperate to be heard. Kaelin spent endless nights in the war chamber, staring at maps that no longer marked battlefields but fractures in the newborn order. Rebellions against the throne had unified diverse peoples, but unity born of hatred was brittle. His calculations grew darker with every passing day. Too many factions, too many rival warlords seizing fragments of authority. He realized with unease that their greatest enemy might not have been the emperor, but the chaos left in his absence. War had order, peace threatened anarchy. Lyra was deaf to such concerns. She still walked the city streets with her sword at her hip, the people bowing and cheering as though she were already a queen. Their adoration filled her veins like fire, convincing her that strength alone could hold the galaxy together. "They want justice," she told Kaelin, her voice sharp as the blade she carried. And justice is not decrees or councils. It is steel. It is fear in the hearts of those who would rise again. To her, compromise smelled of weakness, and weakness invited only betrayal. Darren moved among the people, listening to their fears in hushed corners and crowded markets. He heard what his siblings did not, the uncertainty behind their cheers, the quiet terror that victory would only breed another throne. Children clutched their mothers when soldiers marched by, no matter the banner they bore. Merchants whispered of shortages, farmers of unrest. In his heart, Darren understood that their war was not over. It had merely changed shape. Where Kaelin saw fractures and Lyra saw enemies, he saw a deeper conflict, whether the children of Selene would become liberators or tyrants themselves. The siblings met often in the great hall of the conquered palace, its golden walls now stripped of imperial banners. Each gathering ended in heated debate. Kaelin argued for calculated governance, for dividing authority into councils that could manage the complexity of the galaxy. Lyra rejected such measures outright, insisting that only their blood could command loyalty. Darren pleaded for patience, for building institutions that would prevent another throne from rising. Their voices clashed like swords, echoing through the chamber until silence was all that remained, brittle and unresolved. It was during one such meeting that news arrived of a new threat. A fleet had risen in the outer systems under the command of an imperial remnant, a general who refused to bow even in defeat. This warlord had seized 3 worlds, enslaving their populations and declaring vengeance against Selene's bloodline. Kaelin's eyes narrowed at the report. He recognized the pattern of strategy, disciplined and merciless. The Empire's corpse was still twitching, and its shadow threatened to strangle their fragile victory. Lyra welcomed the challenge. Her face lit with the hunger of battle, eager to take the fleet and crush the warlord's defiance with her own hands. Kaelin, though grim, agreed the threat had to be neutralized quickly before other remnants rallied. Darren alone hesitated. "If we answer every challenge with fire," he warned, "then the galaxy will believe we have inherited the Emperor's throne. We must show them another way." His words met silence, not because they were dismissed but because neither sibling could imagine a path that did not involve war. The decision was made swiftly. They would march once more. Fleets rallied, banners raised, soldiers sharpened their blades. Yet beneath the clangor of preparation, unease lingered. Kaelin saw in the coming war an opportunity to solidify order through victory. Lyra saw only the chance to carve fear into the hearts of the defiant. Darren saw a precipice, the danger that one more battle could transform them from symbols of liberation into rulers of conquest. The night before their departure, the siblings stood together on the palace balcony, the city lights stretching beneath them like a sea of stars. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke, remnants of celebration and ruin mingled together. Kalen's hands rested on the railing, his eyes cold as he calculated the logistics of the campaign. Lyra leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the horizon with a warrior's hunger. Darren looked not at the city but at his siblings, his heart weighted with questions he dared not voice. For a long moment, none spoke. The silence carried the weight of their mother's prophecy, the truth that blood remembers, but remembrance could cut in many directions. Would their mother's legacy end as freedom or as tyranny reborn under different names? The stars above seemed indifferent, vast and eternal, yet waiting to judge. At last, Kalen turned away from the city. "Tomorrow we strike," he said, his voice even. Lyra nodded, her smile sharp and eager. Darren closed his eyes, whispering a prayer that their path would not consume them. In the stillness, the future stretched before them, uncertain and perilous. Their war was not finished. It had only shifted into a battle not against an emperor, but against themselves and what they might become. And so, with fleets prepared and banners lifted high, Selene's children marched once more into the void, carrying with them not only the weight of vengeance, but the fragile hope of a galaxy desperate to see if freedom could survive its saviors. The fleet carved through the darkness, ships lined in disciplined formations, their hulls gleaming with fresh banners that bore the crest of Selene's bloodline. Engines pulsed like heartbeats, driving them deeper into the outer systems where the warlord's shadow had taken root. To the soldiers who filled the warships, the journey was electric with anticipation, a chance to strike another blow, to prove that their victory over the Empire had not been a fleeting miracle. But for Selene's children, the silence of the void was heavy with the knowledge that each step forward carried them closer not only to an enemy, but to the fracture within themselves. Kalen stood in the command chamber, the map of stars projected before him. His fingers danced across the holographic constellations, repositioning fleets with the precision of a master strategist. Every move accounted for supply lines, fallback points, and contingencies that only he could calculate. To his mind, war was not chaos but mathematics, yet he felt the storm of uncertainty rising in his chest. The enemy commander was no reckless brute, but a tactician of rare discipline, one who had served under the Emperor and survived countless campaigns. Defeating him would not only secure the outer systems, but test Kalen's own claim as the rightful inheritor of their mother's mantle of command. Lyra could not abide the stillness of planning. She prowled the training decks, sparring with soldiers until sweat shone across her brow and her muscles screamed for more. To her, waiting was poison, strategy a cage. She longed for the thunder of battle, the feel of her blade striking through armor, the certainty that came only when enemies knelt broken before her. Every night she dreamed of their mother, standing at the edge of fire, and every dream ended with Selene's voice echoing, "Strength is truth." Lyra clung to those words, blind to the possibility that strength alone might not be enough to shape the future. Darren drifted between decks, listening. He sat with mechanics in the engine bays, with pilots in cramped bunks, with healers preparing their wards. He learned their fears and their hopes, and in their voices, he heard the echoes of the galaxy itself. Many followed the siblings not out of loyalty to blood, but because they believed in freedom. Yet whispers had begun to spread. Were Selene's heirs liberators, or were they the seeds of another dynasty? Darren carried those whispers in silence, knowing they would be dismissed if he voiced them, but also knowing they could not be ignored. The enemy revealed himself sooner than expected. Scouts reported a trap laid in the Kestrel Nebula, where radiation storms and shattered asteroids made navigation treacherous. The warlord's fleet lurked there, hidden and waiting. To press forward meant risking annihilation. To retreat meant surrendering worlds back into chains. The choice lay heavy on Kalen, whose mind calculated probabilities with grim focus. "We strike carefully," he decided at last, outlining a maneuver that would thread their ships through the nebula storms and catch the enemy from an unexpected angle. Lyra snarled at the delay. "Carefully," she spat. "The longer we wait, the stronger his hold becomes. We must cut out the rot before it spreads." Their argument burned through the chamber, voices clashing as soldiers watched in uneasy silence. Kalen demanded patience, Lyra demanded action, and Darren, standing between them, saw only the widening gulf. At last he spoke, his voice steady though it trembled beneath the weight of truth. If we destroy him with rage alone, we prove the galaxy right to fear us. If we hesitate, we lose those who look to us for salvation. We must fight, yes, but not only with fire. We must show the people that even in war, we are different from those we toppled. His words lingered like smoke, uncomfortably true yet impossible to resolve. The decision was made by circumstance. The warlord struck first, his ships erupting from the nebula in a storm of laser fire and ion trails. The void lit like a second sun, and the siblings' fleet reeled beneath the ambush. Kalen's orders snapped through the comms, pulling formations back into cohesion, countering chaos with structure. Lyra roared into the fray, boarding parties launched under her command, her blade leading charges through enemy corridors. Darren took to the comm systems, broadcasting not threats but promises, speaking to captured soldiers, urging surrender with words of mercy rather than fear. Each sibling fought in their own way, and the battle became not only a clash of fleets but of ideals. Hours stretched like years. Ships burned, debris spiraled into the void, screams echoed across failing channels. Yet amid the ruin, the warlord's flagship emerged, a monstrous vessel of obsidian steel, its hull scarred yet unbroken. Kalen's calculations had predicted every angle, but could not account for the sheer audacity of a foe who refused to yield. Lyra demanded they board the flagship and slay him before his men's eyes, but Kalen warned it was folly, a trap designed to draw them in. Darren listened in silence, then spoke with calm conviction. If we do not face him ourselves, the galaxy will believe we are cowards hiding behind fleets. This ends with us. And so the siblings went together, storming the flagship in a storm of fire and steel. Soldiers fell around them, but they pressed forward, their bond holding even as their visions diverged. At last they reached the warlord, a towering figure clad in blackened armor, his eyes burning with the zeal of a man who had lost everything but defiance. His voice thundered through the chamber. You think yourselves saviors? You are nothing but heirs to tyranny. Kill me, and you prove me right. The battle that followed was not simply of blades but of will. Kalen struck with precision, Lyra with fury, Darren with restraint. Each blow mirrored their nature, and together they overwhelmed him, but his words lingered, barbed and unyielding. When at last he fell, silence filled the chamber, heavy and suffocating. The siblings stood over the corpse, breathing hard, but none felt the triumph they had expected. Victory had come, but so too had a question that gnawed at their souls. As the flagship burned behind them, and their fleet claimed the field, the galaxy watched. Whispers spread faster than fire. Selene's children had slain the last loyalist of the Empire. But were they saviors, or had they become the very thing they fought to destroy? The void offered no answers, only the endless stars, silent and watchful.